Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, "Neighbors stole half an acre of my land and built an illegal pool and driveway on my property." I am here today to share my story regarding my elderly mother's crappy neighbors so that no one else has people taking advantage of them the way that these people did her. When my father died, I moved back into my childhood home to help take care of my mother. They had owned their country house for over 30 years, raising myself, my two brothers and sisters in it since we were toddlers. It was a beautiful home that had slowly lost some of its curb appeal as my mother can no longer weed the flower beds and tend to the yard. Shortly before Dad passed and I moved in, I had noticed during my few visits that their newer neighbors had been parking some trailers in my parents' yard. I did not do anything about it because Mother said that she allowed it to happen because they had been cutting the grass for her for several months and it was essentially a favor. Fine, I let it slide, so I started the process of moving in, and it took me about a month because I did not previously live that close. Once I got settled, I went over and met with the gentleman that lived there with his wife and two kids to introduce myself. His name was Greg and he seemed like a decent enough guy. The conversation went fine, and before I departed back to the house, I casually asked him if he could perhaps move the trailer back to his property, since I will be taking care of things for my mother now. He paused and scoffed, acting like I was asking him to do something that I had no right to. I told him that while my mother and I appreciated his temporary help, she would no longer be needing it, and I was planning on putting up a fence, so his trailer needed to be moved. This statement caused Greg's neck to grow red and his face hardened with anger, but his words were still cordial. "Oh, just give me a few days and I will have the trailers moved." As I was getting ready to walk back home, he said something else from behind me. "You know, a fence is just going to look ugly. You might as well leave it as it is. The country is meant to be open and free after all." I chuckled at his statement and told him we would see, before going in for dinner. Lo and behold, the trailers were not moved after a few days, but I did not have time to deal with it. That same week, I was on a conference call when I became distracted by the sound of a lawnmower close to the house. When I finished with my work, I went outside to see that the neighbor had cut his yard all the way up to about 20 feet from our house. This was strange because their property ended about half an acre further over. When I think back on everything, I realized that things would have been easier if me and especially my mother had stopped them from encroaching illegally onto our land the first time we noticed it. Unfortunately though, my mother is a non-confrontational person and I was honestly very busy and distracted at the beginning after losing my father and having to move halfway across the state. The evening I noticed that Greg had clearly cut the grass way over our property line, so I approached him again. "Hey Greg, I see that you cut some of our yard. While I appreciate it, it's honestly not necessary." He was sitting outside on his back deck drinking a beer and listening to some crappy music while he grilled their dinner. "Oh well, I had forgotten where the line was, so I just went to where I thought our property ended." I squinted my eyes at him, knowing that this was a bunch of BS. His trailer was still on our property and he knows that, and therefore he knows damn well where the property divide is. "Okay, for the future, the property line is around here," I pointed out to him. "Having a fence will solve this issue." While I was not trying to be rude, it was quite apparent that I was not happy with Greg. That next week I had to unfortunately travel out of town for work and my mother was home alone. I received a frantic phone call from her one evening. She was saying that there was someone outside walking around near the windows and back door. So I told her to call 911 right away. Thankfully, my Doberman Enzo was there to somewhat protect her. She called me back about an hour later to tell me that the police could not find anyone lurking around, but there were footprints in the back flower bed that seemed to be coming from the neighbors. The police were willing to go over and speak with them, but Mother did not want to stir up trouble. This made me grumble under my breath. Greg needs a good scare, damn it. The police would have been perfect, but again, my mother hates confrontation. When I returned home, I made speaking with Greg my top priority, but I was stopped dead in my tracks when I noticed that there was excavating being done in their backyard and in mine. I approached him and the crew of workers. My face must have been red and angry looking because Greg immediately seemed to appear nervous. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I asked hotly, to which Greg just seemed to look away and stare at the work being done instead of answering me honestly. "Hey buddy, just putting in a pool. It has always been a dream." I cut him off as I was even more pissed listening to his BS. "I don't give a damn if it is your dream to put in a pool. It's not on your damn property, Greg." His head snapped towards me so hard I thought it might break. I don't think that he expected me to have much to say or what, but he was clearly surprised by my response. I got close to him and said, "My mother might have let you get away with snooping around and parking on her land, but now I am here and this is not going to fly." I walked away abruptly but shouted back one more thing. "This needs to be gone and filled back in by Friday." From there, I went to work on finding a real estate attorney and a property surveyor. The surveyor came out the next day and was quick to comment on the partially dug pool that was encroaching onto our land. I was even surprised to find out that our property line is even further towards their house than I had always thought, meaning they were even more in the wrong. This made me realize that they had also removed trees that were not on their property. This prompted me to do a full examination of the land at this point, finding more and more things that just pissed me off. Apparently they had been dumping tires and trash behind an old barn at the back of our property, amounting to hundreds of dollars worth of cleanup needing to be done. Not only that, but the trees that they had removed were old and mature maple and black walnut trees. The surveyor recommended that I have an arborist come out to assess the damage they had done there as well. After all of the inspections were said and done, the more terrible the neighbors appeared. Over the last year, before I moved in, they had built a chicken coop and extended their driveway on our property. This is a problem. Before the surveyor left, he had a team come out and mark our property corners with purple capped rebar wires. I then took the information I had to Greg, who did not want to hear from me at all. When I stepped onto his land, he immediately started telling me to leave and that I was trespassing. That was rich coming from him. I told him from a distance that I had the land surveyed and that he would be receiving documents in the mail stating what he needed moved or there would be legal repercussions. Instead of doing that though, he proceeded to shove the rebar wires into the ground and completely disregard the obvious property line I was trying to establish. When my fencing crew came, they could not set up because the markers were gone. Throughout the week, Greg continued to park where I asked him not to and left his trailers on my land and his half-built pool. I contacted my lawyer wanting to be sure of what my legal rights were at this point. He told me that the documents had been given to him legally and that he has been informed by my attorney and the surveyor of where the correct and established property line is. At this point, I had the right to take action if I wanted to. So I contacted a tow company and had all of their vehicles and trailers on my property removed and impounded. I also had his partially dug pool filled back in with dirt. I would have moved the chicken coop too, but I did not want to bring fear or harm to the birds. Hopefully Greg would do it himself and take the hint. Greg was livid, but he knew he had no leg to stand on. The best he could do was give me crappy looks from his side of the property while the fencing crew came to install the 7-foot privacy fence. This also meant that he had to move his coop and his driveway over, which was no easy feat for him. Greg made a sad attempt at intimidating me by threatening to sue us, but I then proceeded to show him just how much money he owed us for the trees he illegally removed, the trash cleanup behind the barn, and the fencing costs. Let's just say that he dropped it pretty quickly. It turned out that Greg could not hack the embarrassment and the frustration of living next to someone who made him look like a property-stealing a-hole, and he and his family moved away. I ended up purchasing the home and land from the company that bought it off of him, and now I rent it out to my brother and his family. Things are great now, and we did end up building a badass in-ground pool, but this time not right in the middle of both yards. Figured that would make it a little hard to sell later if it was. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, did you ever have any property-related issues with your neighbors, especially in regards to property boundaries and so on? Please feel free to share your own stories either in the comments or on r/Ripe Stories on Reddit, which is our own subreddit, where you can post your own story and there is a good chance that I will read it in a video. And by the way, while you're at it, I would also appreciate it if you could post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance, your support is very much appreciated. The next one is titled Neighbor Story 1. I lived in a small split-level flat with 2 neighbors on either side. You had the doctor and nurse couple with the dog and the drug dealers who held loud parties almost every night. Now, I know you think you know who I hated, but you would be wrong. I hated the doctor and nurse couple. They were the absolute effing worst neighbors that I ever had. They would lock their dog in the bedroom closest to mine upstairs where it would cry all livelong day. I hated them for that alone, but that was not all. The husband was a bit mad. See, each flat had 2 designated parking spots in front. I did not drive, so that arrangement worked just fine for my 2 roommates. Though they warned me upon move-in that I could never park in the last 2 spots or there would be hell to pay. He had like OCD or something because their porch and garden were immaculate and he would hunt down and scream at the hired landscaping company if they messed up in any way. He would come yelling, stamping and pounding on our door if we were parked funny. I mean, if all 4 tires were in the lines but asked, he would come freaking the F out. He once nearly got in a fight with my dad who parked in his spot to surprise me, otherwise I would have warned him. That was like an actual fight. He kept lunging in my dad's face, spitting, and his eyes were bulging while he yelled about how this was his spot. He once came over with his usual crap because there was a taxi. The taxi did not belong to us. The taxi was waiting for a girl the flat over, as he did almost every single day. The bus in our town was the absolute worst. He knew where to park. The thing is, her next door neighbors were moving and had parked their U-Haul across all 4 spots, and this was the closest spot. I kept trying to explain that no one here had hailed a taxi, and he started laughing while pecking angrily at his phone, going on about that we had done it this time, we were in big trouble. The hammer was going to fall, we were gonna pay. I was about to start recording or calling 911 until my roommate's boyfriend came over. Then they nearly had a fight of their own before he said something like, "Oh, you ain't worth the trouble. I would lay you flat on your back, but you ain't worth it." I moved not long after that, but holy hell, he needed a psych evaluation and they needed to give up that dog. Our other neighbors were honestly the best. We had an understanding, so if we ever texted or went over and politely asked them to quiet down because we had work in the morning, they would. Though them getting robbed by someone I suspect they ripped off made my roommate very nervous after dark. Like, sweetie, we live in a cheap apartment on the fringes of the ghetto. Baby girl, you're fine. And by the way guys, these neighbor stories in the video are from r/Ask Reddit, so they might be a little bit different than usual. And the next one is another Ask Reddit neighbor story. Had a next door neighbor who used to walk around naked in the neighborhood in the middle of the night. The dude's wife had left him when he was locked up in the county jail for 30 days. She left the water running from every faucet and turned off the heat before she left. Since it was winter, the pipes burst and the second floor collapsed into the first one. He lived there with no heat or water. Since he had no toilets, he would relieve himself in the backyard. He collected all kinds of junk and would have yard sales on his 3-foot-tall front yard. Another neighbor called the town about the state of his front yard and they made him mow it. Which, yes he did, in a pair of thong underwear. Maybe they were not thongs, but they were wedged up his butt. Anyway, he decided to retaliate by building a bonfire in his driveway. After the fire department put it out, he stood in the driveway and cursed at the top of his lungs for 3 hours. The cops knew all about him, but did nothing ever. Years of issues. We had a baby at the time and I, female, had her on the patio playing in her sandbox. I heard noises in the hedgerow between our house and his. I realized this nut was watching us and relieving himself. He was about 6 feet from us. I picked up the baby and took her in the house. I went back outside, went up to the hatch and calmly said, "If I ever catch you anywhere near my house or baby again, I will drag you into my house and kill you. Then when the cops come, I will tell them that you broke in. You know who they will believe." I guess he decided I was crazier than he was, and we had no more issues until 2 years later. Husband, baby and I were out in the garden. He was mowing the lawn and I was weeding flower beds. It was a beautiful day. We had the yard looking great and we were really proud. I took the baby in to make lunch and my husband went to put the mower away. About 5 minutes later, the husband comes in the kitchen door that leads to the patio. He has a really weird look on his face. He said, "Come out here a minute." So I go out and he points to a large-ish parcel of newspaper which had a very suspicious brown skid mark from the direction of the nutjob's house. He had poop in a newspaper, wrapped it up and threw it over the hedges. I called the cops and they sent a detective over. The detective went over to the neighbor's house and had a big discussion with him. We made the local newspaper human feces thrown in local's yard, which my other neighbor found hysterical. Then one day we noticed he was gone. We have no idea how long he had been gone or where he went. His ex-wife showed up on our doorstep a few months later to ask if we had seen him. She called the police for a wellness check and he was not in the house. His van that he used to drive around naked in was gone. We sold our house and moved not long after. Years later we drove through the neighborhood and that house had been demolished. The next one is titled Invoice Hell. So for starters, I live in a small village where pretty much everyone knows everyone. I like it a lot. It gives me a sense of security that I feel is underrated in today's society. Friends and neighbors help each other with moving, remodeling, etc. My mother-in-law wanted to have her driveway redone. Being the good son that I am, I ordered supplies and got some friends and family members to come and help out on a Saturday, after which there would be some nice cold beers. This is before the virus, obviously. One of my friends, let's call him John, is more of an outlier and does not get around too much. He is a bit timid but otherwise a very nice guy. I thought it would be a nice idea to include John in the working party so he would get to know some more folks from the village. With the work done and the driveway finished, we thanked everyone that helped for the much appreciated effort. Not too soon afterwards, I received a letter. It was an invoice sent by John for the hours he worked, multiplied by a not too shabby hourly rate. To say I was dumbfounded would be an understatement. It is well known that this kind of work is for free. You scratch my back, I scratch yours, or so I thought. I come by John's a few days later to ask him what the invoice is all about. He says it is no big deal and that he has done it before. He cannot be expected to give up his Saturday to work on somebody else's driveway. He says he thinks this is fair and that he wants to be open about it. I soon understand that John is not going to change his mind and I don't want to get into an argument with him. I paid John myself because I'm rather embarrassed to tell my mother-in-law. A few weeks later, we are at a get-together where John happens to be too. A friend who had also helped says he is thinking of redoing his driveway as well and asks what the costs were. My mother-in-law sums up the different supplies and their costs as well as the beers, of course. John is within hearing distance and I see him glance over. Now is my time. I raise my voice a little and I say, "Aren't you forgetting the labor costs?" She looks at me surprised and I add, "Yeah, you know, John's invoice of X amount, that racks up the bill." An uncomfortable silence descends upon the party as people frown and look at me and John, whose stature shrivels under the weight of those looks. Suffice to say, John had some explaining to do, but he did not look so sure anymore. He wanted to be open about it, right? Under the circumstances, I must say, the invoice was money well spent, although I lost a friend that day. Edit. In the end though, it is all a big misunderstanding which I tried to clear out by speaking to John about it, at which point I explained the point of scratching each other's back to him, especially in a town like ours. But then he persevered and doubled down and I decided to act in the manner I described. John was not new to town, just new to my group of friends and family. John is not a contractor, but he has useful do-it-yourself experience. And guys, of course, one of the best things about coming home is that you get to see Disney again. Can curious why cats do that. They always like to walk around. That's tickling. Like to walk around like your legs, like rub themselves against your leg. Maybe they are trying to mark the territory or something. I don't know. By the way, I'm not naked. I'm wearing pants. No worries. I guess I have very hairy legs. Oh. So I guess she was sleeping, because always after sleeping have to like this. Oh, Disney. She's still such a cutie. Oh. Disney. What do you want to say to the YouTube audience? Huh? Disney. What is your statement for the world? Huh, Disney? Disney? Just some purring motor sounds. I think that's fine too, right? Okay guys, so hope you enjoyed the Disney footage, and I see you again tomorrow. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.